There we go. You can hear me? Okay. So a week ago or 2 weeks ago, went on a little field trip with the mayor and then Ty and Teresa. And I want to show a couple of pictures from that. Did you send me the meeting link? I need it again. Oh, it'll just be in the Mary, do you want to tell them some of the things that you learned from our field trip while I'm pulling these photos up?
I wish it would have been before we built the home. So just want my opinions of it?
Yeah, your opinion, what you learned.
So my impression when we first, it was one in Kaysville we first went to, and the house, they all had a porch. Every one of them had a porch. And the house was about 10 feet from the sidewalk. And you had the sidewalk, and then you had a little parking, not parking, a little whatever.
Recording in progress.
But anyway, I noticed it was all friendly, all beautiful.
I'm on mute.
I'm wondering where they parked
Oh,
and stuff like that, and all the garages were behind the houses. They brought the houses forward. It seemed a lot friendlier if you were walking down the sidewalk instead of having 30 feet to the garage, and then you go to the side of the garage to enter the house. It's like it's not friendly. Nobody knows you're there. And yeah, I was just thoroughly impressed with that aspect. That's the first thing I noticed. And then I noticed the roads were narrower, not by a lot, but they didn't have all the parking, the extra parking on the street. That's what impressed me.
yeah, so this is a master plan community called Hill Farms in Kaysville. And as Mayor mentioned, every home has a porch. The garages are set back. Some are on small lots, some are on bigger lots, all in the same neighborhood. Not this kind of separated Euclidean zoning that's conventional. Everything, the open space area is maintained by the HOA. There's kind of a look at the street through the trees. All the neighborhoods have street trees, and just kind of, well, actually that's the front yard. So they face onto a common green. You know, a lot of times we think every home has to face onto a street, but that's not the case. You can have homes facing onto common greens, courtyards, other ways to orient it. So they have this common green there.
Do you have any of them where, yeah, that one's a little closer to the sidewalk?
Yeah, theirs are all 30, 40 feet. from
Yeah, the
sidewalk.
ones,
Well, the sidewalk goes down the middle, and then it goes to, so they have the common play area in the middle, and then going there.
Those are showing.
That one's a little bit farther.
That one.
And this one is a little bit unique because it has a driveway going to a flag lot. It was kind of a, edge of the community tucked back in behind, kind of the fitting it in kind of space. But you'll notice the architecture is very different on all the homes, definitely not cookie cutter. And this is something through zoning you can require. Yeah, that's the front yard.
How big of a lot?
Well, this one is probably a third of an acre, but some of these are 7,000, 8,000.
you don't have any pictures of the ones that were
If we
real
don't
close.
have pictures small, you should have pictures big ones.
These are small lots because they're,
These are all the others are big. They're lots, all the others.
a lot are a little bit smaller as well.
So you park in the back
Yeah, absolutely.
and enter your home through the back.
Well, so there's different ways of doing it. There's where the garage is behind. The garage is set back, so you have this nice driveway. You can park cars there, kind of, hide some of that. The garage is the ugliest part of the home, so why not put it at the back, kind of hide it around? Or the other way is through alleys. And I think we have a couple of these that you'll see through alleys as well.
But that yellow home you saw, that was actually probably on an 8,000 square foot lot. It was pretty small.
Oh, yeah,
That
that
one
one.
right there.
Yep. Yeah. So I'll share these with you and then send you a link where they are. You can go visit them. We talked about maybe even a little tour. There's nothing like seeing it in person, walking it.
So, running to LO.
A couple of thoughts that you've shared that I think are important principles as we reconcile that with the plan here. You use the word traditional Euclidean zoning versus being able to have almost mixed densities within the same area, which I think is a key component of this. It creates that variety. So that's one thing. The second thing is the master plan. Talked about that particularly in some of this GD&U space to think about master planning. And I like the concept. I don't know that, because we can explore a number of these kinds of things and see which one might fit. For me personally, I've seen ones that have, the reason I was asking about the front yard or backyards, I've seen ones that's their backyard. They all join and it's a community with no fences in the backyard. It's like having a football field in the backyard. So they all join together and it's beautiful. So there may be a component where there's different options, but the idea being there's variety, there's flexibility. And a theme that you'll hear me sharing a lot if you haven't already is this concept of the new urbanism. Congress, new urbanism, this idea of walkability, live, work, play in kind of the same area. You can patronize shops. I mean, it's just this cohesive environment as opposed to, even in this little rural town that we have today before any of the projected growth or plans are in place. If I'm getting a haircut, I can drive to the haircut and I drive to the grocery store and then I drive to get lunch and then I drive to, it's not that I'm going downtown and spending half my day, doing my thing because I can just walk around. I'm in a very rural place and it's not very walkable in that regard because we haven't created, it's just evolved this way. So those are some of the thoughts that I have as we look at this.
Question, and they might already been asked. Apologize for being late. Is this like the daybreak concept, kind of?
Similar. It's a little bit more suburban. It's also it's a piece out of Daybreak. The Kaysville is probably, I'm just guessing, maybe 200 to 400 acres is the development size. Daybreak will be 4,000 when it's done. So Daybreak has some of everything where this would be a slice out of Daybreak, but certainly you could take that and put it in Daybreak, and the same builder actually builds it in both.
Cause it's part of 15 acres.
Absolutely the 15 in terms of residential development. In terms of getting a higher quality neighborhood. Now I want to show you a few things from Daybreak. We also went there.
So I got one while you're doing that. What have we learned? Because Daybreak's 20 years old or better. Because
Getting
my
there.
nephew and nieces used to live down there. It kind of become like a nest down there, it seemed like. And we learned anything to make it not seem like that?
What do you mean by a nest?
Seemed like a really good idea, but it seemed like everything got crammed in there so much, and they complained with parking and it had a hard time with them keeping up their end of it and the neighbors. That idea of everybody sharing is a great idea, but everybody's supposed to share and helping to kind of, they'll keep it nice and that. I was just wondering if.
Well, this is from 2 weeks ago. The maintenance at Daybreak is fantastic. They stay on top of it. They have a HOA that pays for that. There's all different kinds of building lot sizes. I mean, there's bigger ones. You're not gonna find a 1 acre or a 5 acre lot in Daybreak. If that's what you want, come up to Morgan County, right? Somewhere out in the county, or go to Cornish and Cache Valley or somewhere like that. So there certainly isn't for everybody, but the enjoyment of the residents there is really pretty high. And it's not that all of Morgan City would be like Daybreak, but maybe neighborhoods and portions of it could be.
So
And-
that's my question. How much control does the city have over this, and how much are we dependent upon a developer wanting to come in and build like this?
Both.
Okay.
So where the city comes in is the zoning, the ordinance, the big picture planning, and then also recruiting good developers, trying to, there's certain developers that they just can't achieve this. They don't understand it. They can't perform. And so you just kind of raise the standard, and we'll get to that. But I mean, the neighborhood I just showed you was Kaysville. The rest of Kaysville is not like that. If you've been in Kaysville, it's not like that.
And where are we talking about a neighborhood like this in Morgan?
The dairy area.
Okay,
And
the
also the
dairy area.
Rollins Ranch. We'll
Okay.
get to there. But there's some principles here to apply. So you take a look at this
Rollins Ranch.
building right here. What do you see?
Well,
He meant Ralston.
What do you see when you see it?
You mean Susan Ralston's property?
Ralston.
Yes.
Rollins Ranch is in the county.
It's Ralston.
Ralston.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you. Thank you for the
All right,
correction.
oh, yeah.
Ralston. So you see this building here. What do you see? A house,
Or two.
3 units. And the idea is that it looks like a single family home, kind of single family home scale, but it's actually multiple units. And would you rather have, and this is called missing middle housing. And would you rather have, or you could call it a mansion townhome, because it looks like a big house, but it's a townhome. Would you rather have this, or would you rather have apartments? And so this kind of offers, and this is getting at ways that Morgan City can have a little bit of growth. In some areas, have some more units and still look like a small city scale, still have some of that small town feel. I mean, to me, this looks a lot more like a small city, or, instead of apartments, something like this. Here's another one right here. You'll notice the 2 doors or the 2 stairs going up. I think that's also 3 units. And driving down the street, you almost have to like pull over and take a look and be like, okay, is that 2 units? Is that 3? Because you'll see these next to single family homes and you'll wonder, okay, which one is a single family home? Which one is multiple units? And they work and blend together great. There's an example right there. I think that's 3 units as well. And then across the street or down the road, see, there's a zoom in right there. 1, 2. I'm seeing 2 addresses, maybe a 3rd one in there. Just examples. Here's an alley right here. We stopped and talked to residents and this neighborhood was all 55 plus. And the mayor was loving that they were talking about, they throw these neighborhood parties where they're all in the alley, and it's just that whole development within the development is just 55 plus. And
That's not the front of the house.
right, this is the alley behind. And this is part of how you get the good architecture, is you put the garage behind. And it doesn't necessarily cost that much more, because you're replacing the concrete that would go in the driveway and putting it in the back. And so it,
And in this particular one, the housing was on one side and duplexes were on the other, and you really couldn't tell the difference, as far as.
Where are these pictures taken?
South Jordan, Daybreak.
This is Daybreak.
There's 3 units right there. So this building, actually, this is a big one. So this is like, you see, look at the meters right there, 15 meters. But again, it's getting at, that's from behind. And this may be a scale more than Morgan City, but it's going at that residential architecture kind of style. Again, back of the house here. There's the front. Single family homes across the street. Multiple units. Sometimes we get in our mind, oh, we gotta have single family, and then we have to separate it from the apartments and the townhomes. And everything's got to be separated. So ages and incomes and everybody's in their own little position.
It blends in nicely. I think you get a better sense of community with this type. Just a matter of building ordinances that accommodates all varieties. There's gonna be people that don't wanna have common space. That's great, that's fine. There are places that have more privacy or places, there's all kinds, but there's variety. And it's not just chunked around and very, what's the word?
Separated, segregated,
Word.
Euclidean.
So that's kind of what gets me excited about planning for the future is that type of integration. It's still smart, but creates more cohesiveness amongst the.
So the slide right before that Jake had there, what I liked is their common area or open space area was in the front. And so from driving by, you're looking at this beautiful greenery and then the building and then their parking where everybody has park is behind and the garages are behind. And it just made it look like it was very inviting instead of just a stock building with
A lot wider
Garages.
sidewalks.
Yeah, in some cases, you have I said this was the I-15 sidewalk, the wide one, and then the little narrow sidewalks going to the buildings. And we didn't even have to stage this family biking. They're just coming by. So, open space areas and well,
How big would one of those outreach units be?
one of these buildings.
Living space?
Well, I think these are like condo units in here, so I'm guessing 1,000 to 2,000. I mean, this building itself is a pretty good sized building, but you'll notice the architecture is broken down, so it looks like single family
Right,
architecture.
right.
Is there a different zone? The ones that I seen at Daybreak, there was the wide sidewalk in between the structures. And there was a bunch of them there and everybody's doors was facing in
Mhm.
and it didn't seem to, of course, it's hard when you think I would never want to live in something like that, but we're not deciding for us,
Yeah, and my purpose wasn't to say that all of Daybreak applied. We were picking and choosing, saying, okay, what things could potentially apply to Morgan? And I know what you're talking about. I've been to a bunch of those developments and I would take those to Salt Lake City. I wouldn't take them to Morgan.
So question on the zoning then, is there a difference
Well,
in writing the zoning that would eliminate some of the
Yes.
things we don't like? Okay.
yeah, easily that can be done.
Okay.
I mean, Daybreak has a little bit more wide open and a master plan community ordinance for Morgan City would zoom that down into what is deemed appropriate for Morgan City and desired. So I just bring up this open space because you'll notice, it's a water basin or a stormwater basin, but it's also open space and it's also kind of natural. It's not necessarily, manicured as well. And there's a place for parks that are manicured and also places for, native vegetation and weeds. Oh yeah, right there going in. And they're building mountain bike trails and jumps and all that. So you can go ride them on your e-bike or sit on your porch and watch it. Okay, so I wanted to show this community is on, if you remember the old Granite High School in Salt Lake, if you'd been there, my dad actually went to school there. This is the actual land of the Granite High School. They closed it down and then part of it went to a builder to build. And what's different about this is all of the front yards and especially the park strips are water wise. And this is probably, I'm guessing here, this could be the first development in Utah where every park strip is water wise. And I kind of see this as being the future based off of the state legislation that came out this year, the push for that, the droughts we're getting, more people, same or less water. This is kind of the direction, but I want to just show a few pictures of that. And some people noted that the ones that are water wise look a little bit nicer than just the but you, of course, there's all kinds of plants, roses, grasses, perennials, just a lot of options there. I don't love the red bark, but you can have the red bark if you want. There's the gray and rock, and just an example of a whole development moving towards water-wise.
Probably limited as the type of trees they can put in the park strip,
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
Drip irrigation.
And those are the kind of things that need to be governed, because I've seen a whole lot of xeriscaping that's watered with sprinklers. So we gotta watch out for that.
And the flip the strip ordinance by like Weber Basin and Jordan Valley Water Conservation Basin requires about 50% coverage of plants in the park strip. So that at maturity, when the plants are full size, it covers about 50%, not including the trees. So it is getting towards, beautification and not just gravel and nothing, right? Sometimes you say xeriscape and people just think of the desert or Arizona where nothing's growing. And that doesn't have to be the case. Okay, I'm gonna get to the last example. Oh,
Just a question.
Yeah.
Are you starting to see more of that built? City ordinances? Let's say, not to recognize it, so build some of this into the ordinance, but we're talking residential. Residential is 5 to 10% of water. Commercial might be another 10 to 15 to 20, depending on industrial. Most of the water use is still agricultural, and that's where the biggest waste is because it's not efficient. We still need to water our agricultural properties, but can we water wise our agricultural uses as well? And we're going to get a much bigger bang for the buck than we're going to get by focusing on the 4% parking strip throughout the city.
So I think you're absolutely right in terms of where the water's going. But this is what we can control as a city.
Larger zone areas or agricultural areas.
Absolutely. So SB 110 from this year, state bill, requires that all general plans have a water efficiency and usage, something like that. Maybe Steve can correct me. And it's by 2025. And so the state is telling all the cities to start including water. And by putting it in your general plan, that'll move to ordinances, and we'll get to a point where what we see at that granite development will probably be more required than it is today.
It's been 6 years. A fair amount of experience with that kind of land.
And the park strip, it's the low hanging fruit. It's hard to irrigate properly. 8 feet wide, 6 feet, those ones that are 4 feet wide, sprinklers aren't meant to do that very well. And so that's the low hanging fruit. And it's also a non-usable space, right? We don't go out and play soccer in the park strip or have our barbecue in the park strip. So let's move that to waterwise. My last example, real quick, is Bountiful Main Street. Probably the best main street in Utah. If you take out Park City and a few others, it seriously is the best. And one of the things that's really great about Bountiful is it has all the components within short walking distance. They have this brand new park. I think I don't know the exact price, but it was a very nice park. There's the water feature there. They also have big grass area. You'll see the bandstand for gatherings. Then they have this, this can be rented out for a concessionaire, soda drinks. This is an ice ribbon in the wintertime. Their chalk art festival you see on there. But having a good sized park right there in the downtown makes a big difference for activities, having things happening. You've been to Jackson Hole, you've seen the arches. There's always something going on in that little square in Jackson Hole, and it doesn't have to be very big. This is just one half block off of Bountiful, Maine.
Well, there you go. I was just gonna say. Did Ty talk to you? I told him, I said, you guys need to go down and take a look at Bountiful Main Street.
No, he didn't, but we were on the same wavelength.
That's Vito's right there, by the way. If you want a deluxe, tremendous Philly cheesesteak sandwich, I recommend Vito's right there. 11 to 2 every day. He doesn't take anything but cash. He has 2 big barrels. You put your money in and you get your change out of another one.
My kind of guy.
But I told Ty about it because I'm down there quite often and I don't mean to take hostage of the conversation. I really like the way they've done it, their Main Street. They have a bakery across the street from this with something on right there with housing or something on top of that. Yeah,
But you know what was interesting?
I was,
Jake pointed out that there really isn't a whole bunch of restaurants on this. It had a variety. There was a dance studio, there was.
2 boutiques, women's boutiques, clothing. I know that because
and,
Cindy's.
music
right.
stuff.
I can tell, they're up by Vito's, yeah. But that's the bakery, yeah.
Well, that's a great point about developing downtown. Where is the starting point for Morgan City to start something like this? You got to have somewhere that's the starting point and work out from that.
Commercial Street has some of this, State Street coming in. You already have some of these building blocks. And so it's just adding to it, maybe adjusting things. Or you have the historic overlay zone, I think has a lot of good components. There's some things that need to be changed in the ordinance, but it's a good ordinance. Having housing in your downtown goes a long way. Planning books say that residents of a downtown spend 1.5 times more in a downtown than somebody who commutes in or travels in. And yeah, they are. And I talked to the city when these were built about a decade ago, and they were going for about 1,200, which actually was a good rent then. Okay, that was a good rent at that time. And they told me that some of their tenants were actually doctors that were building homes or really professionals that instead of going to an apartment complex, they wanted to live downtown while they were getting their home built or that type of thing. And I'm going to show you what the back looks like. I walked inside one of these units, just really nice. This one I think is kind of the
Great ice cream. Made fresh daily.
I've had it. It's good. We had banana chocolate, but the units up above, and part of a good downtown is having activities. So they have this chalk art festival, but I think Bountiful is really dialed in. And one of the benefits of Bountiful is it's not a UDOT main street. So they can control what happens. They can slow things down. It's not super busy. And so that's just something to keep in mind. But
You know, one of the things that was
That's what it
incredible
was, women's
on this
boutiques
two-
right there, touche.
It's 500 east, is it 500 west? Where Costco and everything is, that's west. And yet the downtown, when we were walking, there was plenty of people still there. Because they were being drawn to that, and then the splash, the park with the water amenities was across the street from there. So people were there to visit and do and go, and the people that didn't want to spend any time anywhere were on 500. But there were still a lot of people.
so just a couple more photos. This is a really good photo to understand. So here's the mixed use building right here, and then the parking behind, and the tenant access is here behind going in. This is shared parking and probably some assigned to tenants as well. And then the next layer deep, and this is where cities usually fail, is your next layer deep needs to have some pretty good housing and density. These are townhomes right behind, because you want that population in the downtown. And cities will often zone for the mixed use building, but then they won't allow on the same block or the next block over to have a transition in density. And so instead of going straight to single family, you need some townhomes there. You need that population that's within walking distance of the downtown that can benefit, and they work back and forth together. And so this is a good example to see that transition. And then You only go one block more and you're in single family. So within 2 to 3 blocks, you have mixed use, townhomes, attached housing, and then single family. And they all kind of work together that way.
I'm still kind of thinking about this in terms of principles, and those that asked the question about where more. I think it's a good question, especially as we think about the general plan. If we want some of that, you know, where is that gathering spot? Where is that non-UDOT street, state street? Because maybe not the street, commercial streets, half a street. Maybe we have some challenges to overcome, but where is that you know, that city center, if you will?
Have any of you seen Logan's Center Street lately? They rebuilt the street, but also they've a lot more uses, and it's beautiful. So you're coming down Main on Logan and then Center Street, and Center, of course, is not a UDOT road, and that's what they did and that's what cities that have the UDOT Main Street highway running through is your cross streets is where you try to make those as people friendly as possible. And so instead of it maybe being one long street, it's streets across.
So I'll give you a scenario, and what we're talking about here, where we're talking about some townhomes going in on this property where Nampa is, okay? And then you have that house that's back there in that field, which still just boggles my mind. And then you have all that open area there. And you said something to not entice, but direct developers to do what we want them to do. So let's just take that area. That's close to the city center. And you have what I call, it's kind of a nest there, because you got the backside of the hotel, you got that house out there in the middle of that field, you got Napa that is kind of on a side street going nowhere, and they're bringing that in. But how do we as a city kind of say, this is what we would envision to go here, and then not be held to the developers just bringing us plans and we're going, well, it's zoned like that. So I guess, you know, you guys brought it to us and you're not breaking any rules. So I guess that's what we're going to end up with. How do we do what you was talking about?
So the general plan provides the vision, and that's where in the downtown area is the vision. And so as we look at this document, we'll want the vision to be in the general plan of what we're talking about. And then a downtown plan, more of an area plan. And that's where schematically, and I say schematically, you could say, this is how we would like things to be certain ways. The zoning is where the teeth is. It talks about the downtown plan.
I like that idea a lot.
Yeah,
Your city center plan, just like we have a historical overlay, and you have a city center overlay, that, yeah, you're the developer and you come in and do your thing, but there's some strict limitations because this is our city center. And it has to.
So there's your zoning and you can maybe entice if there's certain kinds of development you want, and you can offer bonus densities for those to get that type of development. Also RDA as well. So there are certain levers that the city can pull to make it happen. And the other thing is economic development, you know, finding that type of developer, recruiting them. I know that the developers that built this in Bountiful have been recruited to other cities. I saw they did some projects in Linden and other places where cities came to them and said, we like that. Will you come build that in our city? We'll help make it happen. We'll get you the right zoning, maybe a little RDA funds. So there are levers. City can't wave the magic wand and make it happen, but there's levers that you can pull to get you in that position.
So,
And this Bountiful, those projects didn't happen by chance. The city wanted that. There was RDA, the zoning. I mean, it took time and effort, and that was very direct.
And you have to have private business too, step in and want to occupy those buildings.
Yes.
That's, I mean,
And they're gonna build it. That's who's gonna build. You have to, I mean, the city builds very little of what we have.
After many, many years on the city council, I mean, we've tried for years and years and years to make our commercial street somewhat viable.
So,
And I think finally we're getting there.
You are,
I
yeah.
mean, you know, it's nice to drive up Commercial Street in the middle of the day and see almost hard to park now, but you know, so I mean, it's, you know, I guess my point is it's step by step, little by little, because we've been a lot of years just trying to get that Commercial Street viable. And,
Jay, can I ask a question on the Bountiful?
Yes.
So you have the main street behind it, you have, you know, you have apartments above, but what did that look like 10 years ago? Would somebody have had to come and buy houses out and demolish them? And change everything?
no, that was,
The street was there, but it was 1960, single story. They had some, I think they had more auto dealerships and
There had to be houses behind that main street where you have condos.
maybe that spot. I don't know. I don't know on that spot. I would guess so.
That's what I have a hard time envisioning. Okay, we need to take a city block with a bulldozer.
Yeah.
You know, that's where I would have liked to have seen what that was before that. project.
I'll find out for you.
One of the things that Jake was talking about too is I says, you know, you see these gorgeous designs, what do you do? And he says, you can, you know, get into a design standard, which Oregon City really hasn't had anything as a design standard. You know, we had the historic overlay guidelines, but you know, in a subdivision, we could incorporate that through our zoning ordinance.
to Mayor Gale's point, the vetoes I pointed out, the ice cream store and the bakery. I wondered the same thing. Were they once upon a time a single story building? And they come along and build on top of it? You
Well,
know,
those are new buildings. Those are new buildings.
they
10 years
they
old.
tore whatever was there
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
But if you go farther to the north, where the piano company still is, it's a music store, is to the north, that particular block has not been renovated. And you can see, because most of them are flat roofed, 1-story, 40, 50-year-old buildings. So down, you can see it.
That's
in
just 2
Bountiful.
blocks north.
Yeah, 2 blocks north from what we just saw.
The old thing is still there.
Oh, it was a hardware store.
Yeah.
There's a building called the White House down there. That's a reception center that's down that way as well.
see, like in Morgan, when you pull in to our city, there is nothing that entices you to go down Commercial Street if you're not from here. And why? Because we got that house on the corner. If you look up the hill, if you can see up the hill, you got that old garage right there. And so those are kind of things in the future. Could you make it like, if people ever sell that it needs to convert to commercial or some, you know, because I just don't see anything that would invite somebody that's pulling in for gas really to go down Commercial Street. And that's kind of what everybody's kind of wanting to get started, it sounds like.
Well, and it's such a hard left, right? If you're coming, whichever way you're going, it's a quick turn, right?
Yeah.
You need to know you're going to Commercial Street.
Yeah.
Line of
Or-
sight is horrible.
Or you're gonna miss it. And that's where through zoning, you incentivize what you want to be there. You know, if whoever owns this home, we're not telling them they need to go away. But through zoning, the city can entice that property. What is it gonna look like next? And that's where the private market would come in and offer them a nice penny for them to move somewhere else. And maybe at some point they want to live it more in the country or somewhere else in the city. But I think you're right. We do need to figure out how to get more people down Commercial Street, or there are other areas connecting this together, because your opportunities are spread out.
We can make one of those properties go away.
You know the
That's the
owner?
prettiest one.
For the right price.
Come on, Nate, take one for the team here.
What are,
His parents.
Oh, right here?
Pool.
Oh, right there. Wow. Hey.
Gated community. and-
It should be noted that pool was not there when I was.
Oh, it's nice Airbnb right there with the pool.
There you go.
So what are the rules on stuff like that as you're talking about commercial street? This is before I worked for the city, but I've always thought it was unfortunate that the city didn't purchase the house on the corner and the duplex behind it and the fallen down shop behind that.
Mhm.
With the exception of the pink house, we could have owned that entire strip. What are the rules on if the city sees a home come for sale? Can the city purchase that? And I mean, for future, yeah, but for
Have your
future,
checkbook, Mayor.
but for, yeah, but for future, that interchange, there, the intersection there to have owned that home. I mean, when it was for sale, you will never, whether it's UDOT that needs it or Morgan City that needs it, you will never have got it again that cheap when it was for sale. Then I just wanted to mention too, when you were talking about pulling into town and someone was saying, well, where could we have done this? Where would this work? I can think of about 3 acres over in North Morgan. You drive into North Morgan, the Valley Vista, whatever townhomes. Welcome to Morgan City. And you got this, it looks awful. This long, low roof. I mean, I think it looks absolutely terrible. The little Valley Vista, Mountain Vista villas, the
Where's
little,
that?
Is that the one between the interstate and 700 north?
that's
Exactly.
up for me.
Just behind.
No, not behind me. Keep going. It's the little strip, go up, no back.
Right off 700 East.
It's between that development and 700 East. It's not there yet on this. No, you gotta go
Okay.
back.
Oh, that's it.
Okay, no, it's right there. It's between 700 East and that street. Welcome to Morgan City. It looks awful. I think it is awful looking. You drive by this low, long, one single roof. If you could have gone in there, you probably could have allowed them to have double the density, yet it would have looked like single family homes.
Yeah, the three hooked together.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you drive into town and look over there, it's a 55 and older community. But I think that looks awful. And this stuff you were just talking about, would have been a perfect place for that. Something that looks nice. I mean, I even picture the townhomes behind Tractor Supply. I think it's a okay development, but man, it could have been so much better if you'd have known about this, make the ends of those barn looking buildings look like
Mhm.
More like
a home on the street
More like a
instead of
residential
the end of a barn.
more like a
So,
residential.
and I think
home.
there's a lot of places in small areas that the stuff he's talking about, we could have done this stuff.
So in the last 10 years, and this isn't to hurt anybody's feelings here, I've had 3 developers come in my store and we just got talking, and all 3 of them have said the same thing. I'd never, ever do anything with Morgan City. They are the toughest people to deal with that I've ever dealt with anywhere in Utah. And now whether that's truth or not, I don't know. That's their perception of the whole deal. But when you're talking about enticing developers, you know, that some of this stuff we're talking about is awesome because we want our city to be great and look nice and grow right. But we need to be able to wine and dine these developers without, given every inch that they want on everything. So I think that's a fine line.
And that's where zoning comes in. If you can have things by right, meaning, let's say someone wanted to come in and build the type of development that the city wanted, that if the zoning says you can build this by right, meaning they can buy the land, they don't have to go through the public hearing and do a referendum and all that. They can just buy it, they plan it, goes through planning commission at the plat, and then, write in the design standards and moves right on. that's something that developers are really looking for, is that development by right. And that's where having the ordinance in place ahead of time that entices that.
Just take last two examples. I like those, take the two examples. What different do we need to have in place, for those two developments before they came? What would we need to have in place, make them look like what you showed?
Maybe some architectural standards in terms of roof lines changing, where the garage goes, maybe a landscaping ordinance, just certain ordinances. Yes. And this is the way I see it is, the city, you have the right to zoning, but to do it properly is you define the sandbox of what you want to be built and how, and then what shouldn't be. But then within that sandbox is creativity and flexibility. We're not telling everybody they got to build a brick home in Morgan City, but allowing multiple architecture styles. There's allowing for creativity, but then also the things that get you the development you don't want, you pull those out.
So you're going to,
If you had the standards, the developer looked at that, so that's what they're talking about, we'll build that way. How do you still? Those are built, that's the example, Austin's now.
And maybe there's bonus density. Maybe they get one more unit, one more unit or certain thing. And in some cases, it doesn't necessarily cost more, putting the garage back farther, maybe a little bit more concrete, having them plant trees in the street, park strip, that's $400, 2 trees. There's some things are lower cost than others to get to that.
Well,
Architecture stuff in the shores, we don't cost a lot more than architecture.
well,
I didn't look at those buildings.
no, I lived there. I was in all the meetings, people arguing and not understanding what was going on. And to drive down that street or to drive down 650 East and have it look like it continues single family homes rather than the back of townhouses. I think I would have quite willingly, and there's probably people that run me out of town for this, gave them 5 more units to have a decent looking community from the backside and welcome to Morgan City as you pull into town. If we could give them 5 more units, but have it's going to look like half the units, but you give them more. I mean, you don't even realize. I kind of want to get a day off someday and go on a field trip myself. You don't even, Teresa was showing me some of this earlier today. You don't realize what it is. Well, you drive into town or drive down 650 East, you know exactly what it is. You drive through behind Tractor Supply, you know exactly what they are, as opposed to, you could have probably made that look like a dozen nice single family homes, and hidden right there in it all was 90 townhomes.
But if we get, I think the key is to get one started in Morgan that everybody can look at and goes, that's what we want from the future. The developers that come in, we want it to kind of start looking like that. And as now, like Lance says, we don't.
got one tonight.
I was gonna say, we got one tonight. At what
Got one
point can
tonight.
you
Well,
can you
probably have the
discuss?
discussion, but you can't.
But you
can't.
But the
You're-
raised point, I mean, yeah, they look great, but how do you?
You're too late maybe, but you can always have the discussion with the developer saying, what kind of incentives could you do? Let's
A picture of what
look
we
at,
kind of like, what it takes to get.
let's
you to
look
build
at something like this. Maybe you can get a couple more units in there. I don't.
Is there such a thing as you weed out some development?
And that's true.
Find one that fits what you want.
Well,
Is there a
And that-
legal reason
that may be part of it as well.
for something like that tonight? I'm just curious. Are we showing disparate treatment to one developer versus another?
Well, you could say that this is where we're going with our general plan. Would you be interested in reconsidering your design if we change the ordinance that would allow you some more units or something like that?
definitely have to be some incentive of some sort.
Yeah.
It's gonna cost.
I guess that's the question. Can we?
That's true. Time is money. Yeah.
Well, and since I've been working for the city, I've learned that there's things that take 10 years to do. So we just, well, start now is waiting 10 years to decide to start.
Wheels move pretty slowly on some things.
Sometimes.
For sure.
And we might run into a developer that has done a community like we're talking about already. And he could cut the cost of the architecture and everything, Most guys will do what you make them to do so they can make the most amount of money. But if you say, hey, you got a plan B, and if they've already built something like that, they have the plans and the design and know how to do it. So I think it's just getting started.
I do have some items on the future land use. Maybe we can talk about that after item number 1.
Yeah, just for the rezone. And,
What?
All right, we've got 2 minutes till the general session, so thank you, Jake. Well, let's wrap there.
You're welcome. Does anybody have a charger I can borrow? Would maybe work on a Lenovo? A Lenovo. So
Drink
I
of
think
water,
a
that would
USB.
collapse. I can't even lift it up.
It's all I'm allowed to have.
Really?
Like a micro USB. One that goes into those.
But that didn't. That's why I knew what it was.
Well, several years ago, I used one of these.
It could be a
And so sore now that it actually does help. Like I can barely use my arm. I don't feel.
We got more
I don't have a
ideas.
problem with that at all. That's gonna help.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
I thought maybe it'd be temporary. That was like 3 years ago.
Well, they said the only way this thing can heal is to not use it. So, well, it's my dominant hand. Unless you put it in a coma for 3 months, how am I not supposed to use it? You know?
10 years? Heavens, no. Sometimes I look at an Eagle Mountain or I look at Saratoga Springs and I think,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be nice to build a city right from the ground up?
You could do the whole state.
You look at Eagle Mountain, look at Saratoga Springs and you say, okay, those are 20 years old. They had all, they had.
Where someone's not here today. Alternate water goes here.
Yeah. In that case, make it the damage because they're coming in and rural. And they say, "Work with us on this, we're gonna do something on that."
Well, maybe not that one. Some of the other. Yeah, I see what I absolutely. I just don't.
You can, it's, this is a short time to get it all
That's
ready.
all.
Right.
But you have to have a plan. If you're working.
You can. It's great.
You're gonna come out with.
Yeah. I think it's a good area. Steve as well, but.
I was gonna ask you.
It's temporary zoning. If I see that we're feeling that pressure, like, no, we want zoning, like, let's do it. I think it'd be good for the city to do it.
Where we want.
Yeah. And also bringing in. So we can create. You have a chart, I was looking at the chart.
Oh, a block.
Yeah. But I need the chart, this is just. That's how it works.
Teresa, are we? Yeah, not very good.
Well, the chart go over here. Yeah. You know, the free from.
Just show me that.
Maybe this will work. Okay, let me get this straight.
All right, looks like we have waiting room. If we can bring him in, then I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening. Tonight is Tuesday, June 21st, the first day of summer. Welcome to the June edition of our Planning Commission meeting. Thank you for those members of the public that have joined with us. Is there still a sign-in sheet? Did you by any chance get to sign in on your way in? If you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be fantastic. We have just a couple of items on our agenda, really one project and then our minutes. So we'll go through our minutes first. Thank you, Teresa, for sending those out in the packet. Hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to review last month's meeting through those minutes and either confirm or recommend any edits. At this point, based on that review, I make a call for a motion to either approve or amend those minutes as documented.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as supplied.
Thank you. Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving this, the minutes as outlined, please indicate. Unanimous in the room. I see Jason's hand up, so I think we're good. We're good to go on that. Our agenda item for tonight is the project. We've got two representatives from the development here tonight. This is the parcel of land behind State Street, just I believe was that east behind Napa and North Front and those properties. This project came before us in October of last year, primarily for a partial zoning change. And that was at that time granted. We had the public hearing. We recommended that move forward. The city council in the subsequent meeting then approved that change. Since then, we haven't had a lot of updates on what you as the developer have been up to behind the scenes. So now's the chance. We know you're here tonight for concept approval. And so before turning it over to the NICE to talk through the project, let me just ask Jake if you have anything to add from a staff perspective.
I do have kind of a report. Do you have that, Teresa? And just kind of go through that. So as way of background, we did meet with the applicant online, did an online meeting. And one of the things we talked about was the road cross section. My understanding is that the street was built a couple decades ago before current city standards were in place. And it's a 56, is that right? 54 foot cross section. And the city standard is 60. We met with the applicant, we discussed it. Matt Harvickson city engineer made the recommendation that it be a 60-foot right of way for on-street parking, park strips for landscaping, trees, but also snow storage, and then also sidewalks. The applicant submitted a plan with a 60-foot right of way. And then my notes, then we'll go back to the map. Thank you. As way of background, the property is in the RM 15. The RM 15 allows for single family attached, also townhomes. And it does conform to the zoning with the 16 units. And how the zoning works is the first unit, you need 8,000 square feet and then 2,000 for each additional, and the lot is big enough for that. The setbacks are according to zoning. Also has the parking with the 2 per unit and then the one per 3 units on the guest parking. So our conditions are, our recommended conditions are from the sensitive overlay that 4, 5, and 11 and 12 from the sensitive lands ordinance be met. And I don't know that we need to go through those.
What's just for my benefit, the stipulation with the sensitive lands? I wasn't sure what criteria had to be met there.
So the city has a map of showing sensitive land areas.
So what's the sensitivity? Is it
Floodplain, floodway, and slope greater than 30%.
so this would just be the flood
Yes.
consideration?
Yeah, this is a flat site. And so the items that do not pertain to this site, such as steep slopes, and then also vegetation, the land's being farmed, is that correct? So it doesn't have the sensitive vegetation that you might see in a wetland or riparian area or something like that. Do you want to go to Matt's comments as well? So the engineer just basically had recommendations for conditions also, which the applicant will need to meet when they bring in the final plat and construction documents. But as staff, we did feel it was, the plan was in a good place to make a recommendation for the
just to-
preliminary.
Thank you. Sorry to cut you off. Anything else?
That's it.
Just to clarify then the scope, if you'll scroll back up, Teresa, to the site plan. As we look at what the applicant's asking for tonight, which is this preliminary approval, we've got parcels 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I just want to confirm that we're talking about the entire site, or are we just looking at 1 and 2 because that's what's been designed as far as the townhome concept? In other words, will 3 or 4 come later and we're only looking at 1 and 2 in scope tonight?
Yes. Just
Okay.
looking at 1 and 2. When they decide to develop 3 and 4, which are commercial properties in commercial zoning, then they would have to go through that process again. I mean, the road would be in place, but in terms of site design and what happens on those, or if they want to further subdivide, 4 is a bigger property, maybe that's 2 or 3 commercial lots. So it would go through that process again if it is going to be platted.
Okay.
If it's going to be built in terms of straight into construction documents, I don't think they would need a conditional approval. Is that correct, Steve?
That's, you're right. If they come in with one that's a permitted use on either of those, then they could go straight to site plan approval, which is done by staff under the ordinance. So the planning commission wouldn't necessarily see those 2 lots again if it were a permitted use.
And then just for perspective's sake, can we get a zoomed out view of that particular property where, just so we can see where that road lines up or might end up going through the rest of that? Just so we can see the central part of the block, the whole block. Whatever map will do that.
Oh, there's in the middle. Yep.
Yeah, and then I missed it.
So got a nice echo right now, but well, if it's not bothering you, I can live with it, but so just to get a perspective here, then that 300 east coming off and lining up with Industrial Road comes into the purple parcel, curves around to the middle of that parcel, and then stubs out. And then coming from the other side, we've got 300 east. Okay, so that just helped. I'm just more trying to get my bearings with where those fit.
That's just the end of the 9 parcel. This is where the 16 units would go, and this is where the commercial.
Okay.
And then this is currently undeveloped.
All right. Before we go into discuss this a little bit further as a commission, I'd like to give the developers an opportunity to share any information that we should be considering about this project. Would one of you be willing to do that?
Brian, you can just have a seat up here.
There we go. Is there anything in particular that you'd like me to share? I guess I'd start out with. Any questions? Everybody's familiar with the property and
Familiar with the property and the project, based on what you shared last time. I would be curious, your full vision once the commercial side's added to this as well.
well, like we talked about before, is that the demand for housing is the high point right now, everywhere, but which is the driver for the commercial to fund that. We've had different interest in both of those parcels or in commercial in general. And I have my own vision of it. Me and Cody, we've talked about it a little bit. Now, is that to come to tuition? I don't know, fruition, but it's, I'd like to personally see, I don't want to see the chains personally come and just dot Morgan City. But I know we have McDonald's coming and doing that, but personally, I wouldn't like to see it all. I'd rather see the heritage nostalgic of Morgan kind of be there. We've talked a little bit about it in the last planning meeting when we sat down of it would be nice to see something in my eyes, kind of down the lines of like Beaver has Midway in the way of a creamery type of thing, type of a destination. You co-op the Rose Dairy or the Clark Dairy, or you know what I mean? And this is just kind of thoughts is what it is more than anything. Because that's not my expertise, is their business. But that's what I'd like to see, something like that on those properties. I've also thought about different flex properties that I think we've talked about a little bit, as commercial on the bottom, residential on top, or a mixture. They can use the whole thing as a distribution type of a building, that sort of thing. You see that up in Park City. You see it on more high-rise stuff down in Salt Lake. Not looking for that, but more of a 2-level, commercial on the bottom, residential on top. Those are some ideas, and now those would be addressed when we come and go, okay, is it permitted? Is it not permitted? Is it, but I'd like to have some input of what does the city, because I don't believe you have a zoning for that sort of flex multi-use.
Historic overlay
I know you're-
allows, but we're at the meeting before, we just spent about 30 minutes talking about that. So
Okay.
it's on our minds.
So, and I don't see those other 2 lots moving too quick right now. That's not priority, is where I'm at. So it's the townhouses and getting those done first. So, but it's a tricky piece of ground because it doesn't have the frontage of State Street. If all those houses were gone, it would make a whole different ball game, but that's not mine. And I don't have the money to go buy all those houses anyway. So it's one of those things that, we'll deal with and put what fits and but I'd like to have some direction a little bit of what the city likes. What do you want to see there type of thing? Because before last time we talked with the council, it was, we want to see commercial. Well, what is commercial? It's changed. It's changed over the years from the ma and pa shops go in to now it's Amazon, deliver at your door, it's distribution, it's those sort of things. So what is it exactly? What are we going for? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway.
That's fair. Thank you for commenting on that. And I think you've asked the same question of us. What is the vision? And Jake mentioned a little bit that we just came out of a conversation as we're trying to amend as we speak the city and county's general plan, which guides the vision. And I think it's worthwhile to share some of those thoughts. Clearly, it's not finalized or codified, but it is something that at least lets you have that insight into what's some of our minds, and we're not all of the same opinion, so everyone else can weigh in individually. But let me try to summarize a couple of those thoughts. One is just like you, and you had me at creamery, by the way. We like, we want to preserve the character of this community, and it's gonna change, it's gonna grow. And I want to be smart about it. So as we're being smart about it and preserving the character of the community, how do we keep things pedestrian friendly and walkable in a city center and a gathering point and this connectedness? And this particular property, and we talked last time you were before us, is some of Morgan City's prime real estate, at least in my opinion, because it's that central block right in our downtown area. And so for me, as I look at what we've been talking about, is how do we create some density and some opportunities in townhomes and multifamily, structures, but they don't necessarily look like a traditional multifamily structure. There's variation in architecture and design, and some of them almost look like single family homes with 4 different units in, and Jake can share some pictures of that if you're interested in seeing. But the other point is, this is kind of a city center type of area. And at some point, parcels 3 and 4 will be a commercial property. Who knows what's going to come in, behind you right now. That's more residential zoning, I believe. But the concept is that could be this very interesting alley. I realize it's a 60-foot road, but lane or street that has close proximity to the park, a lot of pedestrian, traffic maybe going through there. Could be different shops and things. So if I'm looking at that type of a future, I'd look at just the layout that you have right now, where it's you've got. Will you put that back up? Let's do that one first, and then we can show a pic. We'll do the show and tell. So right now you've got your road coming down, and then you've got the 8 units on one side, the 8 units on the other side, and kind of that parking area to access both in between. I would almost be looking to rotate that, where the units, instead of facing each other, are facing the road potentially. And then, like we talked about, how can we make that compelling for you? Is there things that we can do as a city to give you more density that allows you to still recoup any costs, but then you might have something where you've got that residential or that mixed use. You've got the retail space below. It may not sell out right away. You've got the condo lofts above, or you've got a mixture of some or the other, as opposed to being additional alleys off the street. So that's the kind of vision that I feel like we just finished having a conversation about. Now, you weren't privy to that, and this is all drawn out before, and this is perfectly compliant with what we told you last time. So I recognize all of that. I'm just trying to share back with you the vision that as I see it and as I heard it. But I want others to kind of weigh in, and then maybe if Jake can re-show a couple of those pictures, just so you have an idea of what we're talking about with this townhome concept that doesn't look like a townhome. So anyone else want to offer your opinion? They've heard mine.
We talked a little bit about what motivated a developer to shift gears, I guess, and get started. Nate talked about, and we talked about in our meeting, that we're trying to find this somewhere is a starting point for Morgan City. Commercial Street, for anybody that doesn't live here, it doesn't exist if you pull off the freeway. And so we talked about figuring out how to motivate developers, because when it comes down to it, you guys invest, you build, and you get return on your investment. But I guess we need some input from you guys too, of what motivated a developer to shift gears and to do something different, and what would you need from the city, to make it viable for you to do something a little bit different. That's because it seems like, and this is just me, we get developers come, you buy a piece of property, you look at your architect and you say, okay, we got X amount of acres. We want to stick as many houses or buildings in there as we can. And that makes sense to me. I'm a businessman. And what we talked about for the last hour was a different idea about that. But one of the things we talked about is what would motivate a developer, and some communication from you guys to us, and what you would need to shift gears on something like that.
That's a good question. I think I'd have to take a few minutes and think of that one. You know, and kind of, I think it's depending upon the properties, you know, what in the way of different zones and what that sort of stuff. I've lived in Morgan County most of my life. And that's why I say about like a creamery or something like that. So I think for the majority of people, and even the people that move into our county has that same sort of, they like that rural feel, right? And so that's why, yeah, it's got to be profitable. It's got to and do those things. So you got to have X number of units. You got to have this use, but we do have the control of, okay, and that's why we've kind of feel on this is, you know, we've got the control of this ground. We can kind of make more decisions on this with the help of the city. I'm not just a typical developer coming in and saying, let's just dot it and put as much in here as I can, and I'm out the back door tomorrow. I live here. And so that's why I say is these are some of the things that we would like to see, is kind of keep that feel and not just I'm driving down Riverdale Road type of a feel. That's just me. So yeah, that's kind of where it's at. But I think it would be you'd have to look at each one individually. I think different parcels and that, but I don't think that I'm the most qualified to answer that question either, since I'm not a developer by trade all the time. I do small things here and there, but I'm a glass guy. So, no, I see a lot, and I've learned a lot, but
Jake, would you
Yeah.
mind
Sure.
sharing your screen and sharing some of those pictures? And Ryan, the idea behind this is we all first looked at these tonight as well, but it resonates with kind of what we're having a hard time articulating. So maybe you can see a little bit of this as we go through a few of these, and that might help you think about it as well.
Yeah, so this is in South Jordan in Daybreak, and
I was just gonna say, that looks like Daybreak. to
yeah,
me.
and this type of housing, one
Oh.
term for this is missing middle, meaning it's not apartments and condos in terms of big rise or mid rise, but it's also not single family. So it's kind of in the middle. And characteristics of missing middle are house scale. So instead of it being bigger than a house, it's house scale, and also just the architectural massing, the building forms. You know, driving by, you might think that's one house, but it's 3 units. You see the 3 different staircases there on the sidewalk going up. But this is the kind of thing that we've had discussion that in places where Morgan City is going to have attached units and some density, that it looks more along the lines of single family. And this isn't that much different than a townhome, other than the garages at the back, and then some more architectural detail on it. Show you a couple other examples.
While he's pulling those up, we're kind of looking at what point can we have a project or a developer come in and be the poster child of maybe the real life thing, the example that we're talking about. And if your project's one of those, then that's very interesting to us.
And if I could add, the discussion previous was after the general plan, city would like to move towards offering zoning that encourages or requires this type of development in the form of incentives as well. So not just mandating it, but those that do it may get bonus densities or something along those lines is what I suggested. Here's another example. This is also 3 units, but this one really looks like one single family because of the architectural style, but there's 2 units here and then the 3rd unit on the side. Another example Also 3 units.
Are those 3 garage doors right in the front, so they each get one, or how's that?
I think they're windows.
Those just windows? Oh, it's a porch.
Yeah, porch there. So that's 1 unit on the right, unit, the main one in the middle, and
Mhm.
then on the left. But this is all very intentional. And a lot of times, and I've done surveys in other cities where we do visual preference surveys, and we'll show a photo like this, and then one of a typical townhome or apartment. And this type of architecture always ranks much higher in terms of people would rather see this than just a conventional townhome.
So you don't have any dimensions on like a footprint of these, do you?
No, but I could tell you where on Google Earth that you could go measure.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be too hard to. Yeah, okay. So here's 3 units. And there's some of these in Layton City by the Five Guys. Steve probably knows where those are. Some really good looking examples there. So I'll show you. And I've seen this done. So I'm going to show you a project in Kaysville called Hill Farms, and these are single family homes, but it's done in this style where they face onto a common green, and it's a way that you can get around having. I'm going to cruise through the residential here. Single family. Did I pass it? Sorry. It's going the wrong way. Okay, right here. Daybreak has some of these where there's townhomes facing onto a common green. So the port, you almost take a very similar type unit that you have garages behind on an alley, and then they face onto a common green. And that way you kind of get this common area, and it really creates like a smaller community. And I've been by these in the evening times, and there's little kid bikes everywhere and people out, it's just like especially for young families, just a lot of activity going on. But that's another way of orienting the buildings. So I guess my thought for the planning commission would be consider giving him a recommendation, but also an approval because he's met requirements. But if the applicant wants to look at if there's ways to maybe maximize the development, work with the city a little bit, and we see what we can do in terms of zoning ordinances to get towards a project that meets this type of vision and also is beneficial for him, then you could leave that door open. We're kind of combining a long-range general plan ideas with the immediate applicant at the same time.
And I'll try to interpret that. So correct me if I get it wrong, but the idea being we're moving this direction. We haven't put it into ordinance yet at this point. So you as is meet the requirements. But if you're willing to look at, maybe some of this, what can we do, as a city to make that compelling where we get what we want and you still get the return on your investment.
And I don't think you should request that decision now.
Well, sure. Yeah, I realize that those are just idea starters. That's not the material to make a final decision on. And but that's kind of your timing was just happened to come in immediately after we had a working session talking about our future of our general plan, and this was the topic. Well, he's
let me throw around some thoughts with that.
Okay.
See if there, how access would be to come around that, because if you're, I like that with the alleyway up the middle. I do like that. That would create more common space in between and doing that, but how to access. So now you're actually bringing in 2 drives off of these back sides, would you know? You see what I mean?
Yes,
And
and
so
you may want to make your project a little bit bigger, maybe going for more units.
You could either make it U-shaped. Or two. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I don't know that you'd,
With the current layout, it doesn't
yeah, there's
quite
not.
work, but
Yeah.
in terms of making the project a little bit bigger,
And
looking
that's
at
kind of what I
moving
was
things
thinking. So
around.
you rotate the project 90 degrees, so it's facing that main road. Right now, the units are 4 and 4, but if you rotate it 90 degrees and now you might be able to fit 6, but 2 deep or something like that. And so you're actually getting 12 and 12 instead of 8 and 8. You know, whatever, you know, there's options is kind of the point. And
That's yeah, food for thought for sure. Let me throw that around, see what we can do there and kind of create, see if we can
So,
have access there.
wouldn't it, by moving those together to
Mhm.
create that common area in the middle, that would accommodate enough room on both back sides of that to create that driveway to bring in the parking on the back side? I mean, you wouldn't be really losing or gaining anything on that, because you'd move your units closer together to make that common area, and then you'd have access from that street on both sides. Just a thought.
Yeah, you'd make 2 accesses. I've only got 18 feet on that back side is where I've got on each side. So if you slide them together, I mean, you think of a 4-door truck or any one of these little bit larger vehicles. If one is to park in there, you're getting, it's go in and back all the way out. I don't think they'd even be able to turn around in there.
Yeah.
Whereas in that center, you can turn around, but.
so just to reiterate, we know that's not what you came in here for tonight, was to
Right.
necessarily get that kind of feedback.
Well, I'm just, yeah, let me play with it. I can see a couple of things like you're saying, rotate it 90 degrees. You come in from one side, hide the road between them, and so that you got better visibility from the road of green.
And potentially still, you
Right.
either keep your density the same or increase it to.
And that's
Make it
what
worthwhile.
I'm thinking is you could maybe even add 1 extra unit if we rotate it that way and bring them in possibly that way. Let me play with it and see.
You could also look at like an alley swinging like 2 U's behind and maybe one-way alleys. I don't know if the city permits that, but that may be an option. What's that? You don't think so? Oh, okay. But again, I guess the discussion was, city wants to look at, our discussion was wanting to look at different
Mhm.
design types. And so desire there to update and change ordinances as we go forward.
Okay.
So now here's the question, as we look at the work or action. Jason has raised his hand. All right, Jason, you've got the floor.
Hey, thank you. I wasn't privy to that meeting before this, but when you were talking, I love all the discussion that's going on. I appreciate it. One possibility be encroaching and changing the different lot dimensions as a potential outcome? From the standpoint of the developer, if he's talking about not having enough room, either encroaching or changing the lots on 1, 2, 3, and 4 to maybe make the accommodation he needs, but then also create the opportunity for that vision? It seems like you spoke of retail on the bottom, multifamily up above, that multi-use, like, anyways, is there a way to alter that to where it makes the allowable space, is, I guess, is the other thought. Thank you.
I think I'm pretty confined to that space unless we go through a general plan change. Correct?
And that's kind of what we've
Yeah, a whole other
done
process.
the first time 6 months ago,
Yeah,
was change that zoning in the back so you could do this.
right.
So if we were to increase it, it's gonna take a period of time to make that happen again. So if you're under a time constraint at all, that's gonna be tricky.
Right.
There's all, lots 3 and 4, so
Right.
certainly that
But,
opportunity.
the idea is definitely valid, Jason. I just think, the developer can decide if that's worth it to them to go through that process again, or if they want to get started. But it's definitely a good idea. So what I was saying is the action before us tonight then is preliminary approval is being requested by the applicant for what we're looking at here. Now, we've given a lot of feedback. And I just want to be clear, and I don't know if this is a question for you, Jake, or Steve, but if we grant preliminary approval based on what we're seeing here, and the applicant comes back then for, final approval, and it's a whole different layout, then is that, in other words, what's the process, given that we've given this feedback to the applicant? I just want to make sure that we do it right.
Well, we're still just at concept approval, I believe.
Yeah, I thought this was
Okay,
concept.
my apologies. So concept, but same idea, right? So concept approval, but then they come back for preliminary approval and it's different. So what's
Sure. Well, a couple of things they could do, and we've done this in the past, obviously, is that if they refined it, then it's not uncommon for us to do concept and preliminary at the same time, or revisit concept, and at that time it gets refined, and preliminary and final could happen at the same time. But in order just to expedite the process while he contemplates the input.
So if I'm hearing you right, then we can potentially take the action tonight to grant concept approval. At which point the applicant can take this away, either continue as is and keep refining the process, or take the feedback and potentially come up with a couple of different ideas, and then not lose any ground in that next meeting. We could move through concept, preliminary, and move through those all in one step.
My recommendation actually would be, because of the significant change he's contemplating, I'd recommend continuing concept approval. And if he decides, no, the ordinance lets me do what it is I want to do, I want to proceed this way, then at that time he could take the input he's received and he could receive concept and preliminary approval at the next stage. And the same as if he decides to go this way and sees that same vision, the same thing could happen. But with there being, like I say, a significant change, my recommendation would be to continue the concept, and then we could do a double approval at the next time as we're further down the road.
So that's an option that you're hearing. I'm seeing a couple of nods from the applicants, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, let me play with it. If I can come up with something that is kind of down the lines what we're talking about, different layout. Then yeah, like Steve said, maybe we can just do a double on the next meeting. Otherwise, if I can just go, I just can't with this, it's too restricted. We're just moving forward with this. So, but yeah, let me do that. I'm getting.
Me too.
So.
Can you email us those
But-
pictures that we? Yeah, I'd be happy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It might be good if you can give the addresses so they can.
Yeah. I actually have to run out there tomorrow, so to daybreak. So Huh? Well, yeah, sweet. Put your boots and gloves on, buddy.
Chair, just to let you know, Ryan's pretty going to work with and coming to staff. Listening to some requests and both back and forth, and very willing to work with us on this project, because you can tell the passion in it, in the work that we can tell when we've met.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that should be reciprocal, by the way. Every once in a while, there's some feedback that might be received that the city can be hard to work with. We don't want that reputation either, so. All right, so we have some of those actions as outlined that we could take as a commission. I don't know if there's other questions that you want to discuss amongst ourselves as a body, or if you want to recommend either, granting concept approval, continuing concept approval to the next meeting, and then potentially at that point, the applicant could come back with something either different or carrying on with the same thing and move right into preliminary. So there's a couple of different actions we can take, and probably more than that, but any other discussion as a commission?
I had one thought, Nate. So let's say that we postpone concept approval with the thought that you look at this and then come back and we can do the 2 steps in one. If we do the preliminary approval and then the secondary approval, what's that called?
Well, there's concept, preliminary, then final.
Okay, so if we do the concept and preliminary together, is there anything else that would hold up that preliminary approval in the next meeting? Just being mindful of the noise and
Yeah,
willingness to work with us.
I'm going to defer a little bit to Jake. So when he opened up this agenda item, we were showing the engineering notes and some of those. All of that still needs to be worked through, but it is being worked through, and so that'll be happening behind the scenes. I don't know if you have a better answer, Jake.
All of those items would be conditions for final plat and construction documents. So they don't hold up concept approval.
Yeah, I understand that. I was talking about the preliminary approval.
Steve, do you have an answer on that? I don't know where the sensitive is required, if it's at preliminary or final plat.
It would, it generally it can wait till final, but as long as we just want to make sure that they're on notice that that's going to be a requirement, and they can work through the process, and so it really can wait till final.
Thank you.
Quick question. So if I come back with a new design and I add a couple extra units, we switch things around, kind of have this aesthetic look, and do that. And you guys look at it and go, we don't love it. Right? I'm starting back over. You see what I'm saying? And so is there something that we can kind of work through some of these quicker than going through a month down the road and then just go back to the drawing board? You know what I mean? So I'm not spinning my wheels for an extra
Absolutely.
by this.
As staff, we can meet with you and look at things in terms of development review. So definitely we can do that. In terms of planning commission, it is once a month. Not to slow down the project if it were redesigned and it worked with existing ordinances, then you could come with the preliminary, or you could come with concept and preliminary at the same time.
We're varying from.
If
what
we're gonna
is
vary from the
allowed,
ordinances, then
and-
we could put in
Yeah.
for,
Could you have a contingency, and this is kind of what I'm thinking, Steve, so where basically you're coming with two concepts and either, in other words, we could approve this concept tonight and then come back next month with an entirely new concept. And we could scrap tonight's concept and adopt the new one and even move into preliminary at that point. Or if we don't like the new one, because it didn't work out the way that this vision that we have, you already have the original concept approved and you move forward preliminary with that. So you're kind of going down both paths and you don't lose any ground.
I am, and I'm paying my engineer twice.
That's fair.
What I'm doing. And so that's a concern that I'm having right now, is if we vary from an ordinance, that we go in front of the council and the council says, I'm not willing to give up extra units. I'm not willing to change setbacks a little bit. I'm not willing to, you see what I'm saying? That I don't know how guys are going to respond.
Yeah.
Well, we don't want more units. We don't, whatever it may be. Or the setbacks or those different things, because with me putting more units on there, I like the concept. You can do that. I like the aesthetics. I like those things, but that requires more parking. It requires, we can change. I'm gonna have to shift things closer to lines to be able to get more open space, to group that bigger open space, to be able to do that sort of stuff. And so, will I be able to, I'm gonna have to cheat some areas someplace.
There is some.
What I can see
risk
to
that.
give, it's gonna have to happen. I know the last, when talking with Matt, to count on street parking. And I like that because I can get more on street, but not in the winter. Right? You got an ordinance that says no on-street parking. So how do we deal with that?
So just thank you for that. I want to give the floor to Ray's chomping at the bit over here.
Steve, got a question for you. If concept is approved and the applicant comes back with some changes, does that nullify the concept approval?
No.
So help me understand the reason to continue concept rather than approving it. If they come back with a different plan, it doesn't nullify it.
Well, I mean, you'd have to, I mean, he doesn't lose any ground either way. You would just be adopting the new concept approval. So you could do it either way. I mean, either way, at the next step, there's going to be potentially both the concept and the preliminary approval. So yeah, it just in my view, because it is concept, really, if you approve the concept, the only thing you're approving is that it's going to be multifamily residential, right?
And that's all we're approving, not the layout.
Correct.
In concept, might at least, correct me, Steve, all we're approving is a multifamily housing. We're not approving the layout in concept necessarily.
Perfect.
Yeah, not necessarily. Generally, it does, so that you could, because concept is supposed to give you an idea of, traffic flow and those type of things. But I mean, obviously, trying to entertain a significantly different concept
No.
Is what I was looking at when I made that recommendation.
Here's their difficulty, their scenario. I think the council and commission have seen something they like, kind of like a lollipop in grandma's hand. You want to taste it. You want to get the lollipop out of grandma's hand. But the fact is, grandma won't let you have that till after supper. The scenario we have is we like the new ideas, but our current ordinances don't allow us to vary setbacks, don't allow us to vary stuff. They came up with a concept we loved dearly, but it didn't meet our current ordinance. We still couldn't let it go without changing the ordinance first. Is that correct, Steve?
Basically you could do it under development agreement. And this kind of goes back to a comment that Commissioner Woods made in the prior meeting about Morgan being difficult to deal with. We really haven't, but what happened is that Morgan got burnt by a developer under our old PRUD ordinance that you'll remember many, many years ago. And in response to that, the city repealed the PRUD ordinance. We presented several variations since then, and still there's a little bit gun shy. And so Morgan hasn't been difficult to deal with. We've just said, here's our ordinance. You need to comply with it. So I see exactly what you're saying, but we look at the ordinance, the setbacks, the density, and see what can work. But yeah, currently we do not have a PRUD ordinance that enables that type of enhancement, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't on some small scale happen between now and then.
I like the rest of the council. I really like the new concept, new ideas. I think we need to entertain them and look at them. But without an ordinance in place to do that, we can't approve any kind of change against our current ordinance. We can approve new design, new looks at home and stuff, but we can't change any ordinances just because we like it.
Go ahead, Mayor.
I know I'm not supposed to speak in here, but it's a special circumstance. Concepts. Last mentioned, where do we start this? But where do we start this kind of concept? Just you. I was totally, totally impressed with a lot of the things that I viewed. And I love thinking about what Wes said is how do we get it going? And this is I don't even know how to word this. It's almost a perfect situation. We said like Daybreak, what's that, 4,000 acres or something like that. And how are we going to do that in Morgan City? Well, we aren't. And then we wait, who knows for how long before anything else develops that's similar to this, where we have some acreage, where we can have what we viewed by doing a couple of things, and that is to change the ordinances. And we talked about maybe some incentives. I see in this picture, I see the park, I see the common areas, I see the forward-facing houses closer to the sidewalk and the road, I see the garages in the back. And I'm sorry to disturb, I know that isn't, but it just seemed like, and I asked permission from Denise, and she said the mayor appoints the planning commission. I says, I know that, but I don't want to interfere with what you guys mean to the city. But I think it's an opportunity for the city planning and the council to come together and to we just talked about our vision. We just talked about a lot of things. And I think this might be an opportunity to have a run at what we talked about. But
So if I were to marry those two concepts, what I guess I want to understand is if we're asking the applicant to potentially come back with a design that fits more of that vision, does that design need to be compliant as is with our existing ordinances, or can there be exceptions that the city can grant and variances?
well, I'm gonna not veto, but refer to the previous mayor. I don't think, tell me if I'm wrong, Ray, I don't think we can just change an ordinance because we like this we can't do that.
And I'm not talking about changing the ordinance, but maybe granting a variance for this specific situation. Is that even legal?
I do want to have, can we ask Steve talk about the master, what options are open through master development agreement? But I do want to put in a plug that if you have a motivated planning commission and council, you can fast track things pretty quick within a few months. I mean, could put something together that would work and push that through if you have a motivated planning commission and council. But Steve, do you mind mentioning what options we have with the master development agreement?
Yeah, yeah, well, you can enter into a development agreement, but of course, unfortunately, some cities have basically been doing their zoning by development agreements, and the legislature has not been happy with that because developers have told on the cities for doing exactly that. And so, yes, we could do a development agreement, but it has to comply with the current ordinances. Some of our ordinances, though, do provide for some flexibility with setbacks in some situations. And of course, I wish I had the code memorized so I could tell you which ones they were. And so we don't have a lot of leeway, but I'm thinking there may be enough. But I totally agree with Jake that with the vision that the planning commission and the council members present right now have is that we could at least take a run at some of the small provisions that we see that would facilitate, this type of a development.
So what I'm hearing is if we don't go too crazy, the primary risk is not a time risk, because we could move this forward tonight. We can move it forward next month. We haven't really lost anything time wise. It feels like the cost to this may just be, as Ryan indicated, you gotta pay an engineer to draft this up two different ways. And to me, that feels like the only incremental loss on this.
Yeah, and a variance could not be granted, like Jake was referring to. It would need to be some type of a development agreement.
All right, Councilman London.
I guess listening to this for the last hour, here's my take on it. And I assume you've already had engineering done on this and spent some time and money on it. Sometimes I try to put myself in the position of someone else. And so I'm trying to put myself in the position of the developer a little bit. He's come to planning meeting tonight with asking for a concept approval with a plan that he's already has developed. An hour and a half ago, we were talking about how we want it to look and how we think that would look nice. And so do I. I love some of the examples that were brought forth tonight, but I feel like we're sort of blindsiding the developer here tonight. We're asking them to do something that an hour and a half, 2 hours ago, we were just discussing as a possibility of doing in the future. And so I may not always be on the side of the developer, maybe in all matters, but I have a little bit of empathy and sympathy for him here tonight because we sort of threw something on them unexpectedly that I didn't think they saw coming down the pike. So that's, again, I really liked what we discussed in our work meeting tonight. Moving forward, I don't know how we get that message out to develop, and maybe Ryan knows now that if you have another one down the pike somewhere, this is what we want to do. And that, right from the get-go, right from the beginning of the engineering, let's engineer something that looks like that. But this one feels to me like we sort of let the horse out of the barn before we shut the door. So anyway.
Thank you for that. I think we've heard quite a bit of different perspective and know what some of those options are. Is there any further discussion? Otherwise, I'll call for a motion to take action on this.
Mr. Chair, I like all this discussion. I think knowing what I know about the knives, that they probably are going to take a good look at this and see if there is something that could be made to work. There could probably be discussion with city staff on what we could let slide, what we can make work. But Seeing that, I would be willing to make a motion for a positive concept approval for a 4-lot mixed-use development located at approximately 250 north and 300 east.
Thank you for that. Do we have a second on the motion?
I second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? I did see a hand up. Jason, I don't know if that was related to this or not.
Nope, we're past it. I'm good to vote.
Okay, any discussion for those in the room? Then let's go ahead and vote. All in favor? It's unanimous in the room and with Jason as well. So motion passes, concept approval granted. Thank you for that.
And Mr. Chair, if I could be excused, I've got another meeting I've got to get to.
Sound like yeah, go ahead.
Who's asking to be excused?
Please do. Go, you're excused.
All right, thank you.
Chair, can we continue with the general plan discussion?
Let's check in with the commission. If, how much time does everyone
I have
here
some
have?
specific recommendations to throw out.
Okay. So maybe we make this time bound. If we try to wrap up, what, 15 minutes? Does that sound about right?
By 8:30, I think.
Let's set 8:30 as our firm stop. So we need to be wrapping up at 8:25 to make that happen. But yes, I think we can do that.
I sent my map to Teresa, so I'm gonna see if she could pull it up. Yeah, some ideas to throw out. This is by no means is there one more on there? Okay, let's try this.
That's in sent items. Check your inbox, maybe. There you go.
Oh, there we go. So, yeah, that one. So flu is future land use. Here's some. I think you can just, if you download that PDF, and open it. Oh, okay. I think this will work. Does this allow you to click on the notes? I know what they are, so I can walk through them. So first idea is that the dairy up here, this approximate area, be as a future land use master plan community. It's a great size for that. And master plan community is a little bit different than greater downtown mixed use. It may be a little bit more residential. However, in a master plan, you can still have commercial. So we're not excluding commercial. It's just focused more on the residential. And one thing I want to mention is in a future land use, within a land use could be multiple zonings. So when you see the MDR, there could be 1 to 3 types of zoning ordinances or 1 to 4 in that MDR. Don't necessarily look at it and say that's a single zone, but look at it saying, okay, there could be multiple in there. So I'm throwing out this idea of the master plan community in the dairy area, and this idea of light industrial tech or maybe flex in this area. And the only reason for that is this area already is industrial. And so, and the time frame on a general plan is 20 years. what can Morgan City do in 20 years? And my discussion with the mayor and Ty and Teresa is they don't necessarily see this industrial going away. There may be some of the current owners there and businesses are actually considering expanding. And so it's not necessarily going away, but what can we morph it into? Maybe a little bit of more the flex space. Also, could there be, warehouses that have indoor pickleball or, and what we wanted to get away from was anything that was polluting, such as heavy manufacturing. There are certain uses in that industrial that we definitely wouldn't want there, but could this area morph into something that's realistic? An example of industrial moving towards beautification, Brigham City, they have the Forest Street exit, not their main exit, but their second exit. They have landscaping ordinances for that area. Their goal is, yes, it's industrial, but as you go to downtown from that exit, you'll see like nice landscape and good looking buildings. So throwing that out there. Over in this area, this is my chicken scratch with the pen. This is MDR. So instead of this big area also being downtown, this becomes MDR with the frontage on Young Street being greater downtown mixed use. Oh. So, okay. Thank you, Teresa. This will help you, Jason. So master plan in the dairy area. I forgot the name of the dairy. Clark. That's right. I'm going to start looking for housing right now. And then the light industrial in that area, and then MDR in this area with keeping the
Sorry, what's MDR?
medium density residential.
So the frontage on Young Street, once it goes through, you're talking about calling that what? And then the rest of
That would stay as GDMU.
So that the
Greater Town
frontage would
mixed
stay
use.
as GDMU, but behind the frontage would be medium density residential.
Right.
Okay.
And that's kind of what, is that area mostly vacant, or it is mostly vacant? So that also could be master plan community area. One thing, I don't know, what are the parcels like there? I mean, for a master plan, you want larger parcels. They are bigger parcels, like single.
What do you call bigger? What do you mean, I define bigger?
50,
acres?
100,
20
200,
That's
no.
26 and a half acres.
A single parcel that?
Yeah.
That,
6
the
acres.
what you were looking at over
Okay,
by Young
that's something
Street's
you can
26 and a
actually
half.
work with that. You could do,
No place you're talking about 100 acres here. You're
Okay.
6 acres, 10 acres.
Well,
okay, 26 acres, you could do something with, and I have some examples of that. 5 acres, I mean, like we just saw, is a little bit more difficult. One area just for consideration discussion is the Ralston. Is that right?
Not there.
So where the light yellow is over there.
Yeah, this-
out the other way.
Keep
Oh, it's
going.
this way?
Yeah, that way,
Keep
yeah.
going.
Oh, we talked about this area is looking at annexing. So that's an area we talked about, is that maybe this includes the annexation. As the future annexation updates, this area would be included. So the Ralston is a larger parcel that may be appropriate for master plan community as well. The last thing I want to go over, and then a few minutes of discussion that we have, if you'll pan over, Teresa, to the density numbers. And the concept I want to throw out is that densities in Morgan City stay similar to what you have now. And then with the new zoning comes bonus density for incentives. So if a developer will come in and provide parks, the architecture we're talking about, trails, amenities, then they get the bonus incentives. And that's by zoning and it would be by right. So if a developer rezoned to the master plan community ordinance, then they would get additional density, bonus density, but then they would also have to provide bonuses or amenities or things like that as well. And so I just put in some numbers here in red. You'll see the low density residential 2 to 3 units per acre, medium density 3 to 5. That's a big drop from the 6 to 15, greater downtown 6 to 12. And 12 really is that's a townhome density. So at apartments, that's going to be higher, and maybe for apartment areas that would need to be higher. And then if you'll scroll down a little bit, these are some, potential bonus densities. And it needs to be enough that it's worth it for the developer, but then also it needs to be something that Morgan City would be happy with. And these ones I'm still kind of looking at, but I just want to get your thought on the future land use, those different items. And then also, what do you think on the concept of densities being similar to what you have now, but then bonus densities for the type of development that we're talking about?
I got a question. You mentioned that multiple zones for one area. I've never heard that since I've been here. So that's a huge change for a developer to come in and go, okay, I can do this, this, or this. And it isn't always about dollar bills.
Let me rephrase that.
Okay.
So for a single area, the zoning would be the same. If you own a property, it's one zone.
Okay.
But within the medium density residential, there could be multiple zones that would fall under. It's kind of like the future land use is a big umbrella, and then zoning is more specific umbrellas that would go underneath.
Oh, okay. All right. I misunderstood. Okay, I misunderstood you.
Yeah. No,
All right.
so you can't have overlay zones, so they could stack on top that say, if you want to do this type of development with these kind of amenities, then you apply for the overlay.
Yeah, because a lot of times I think these developers, I mean, just from the business standpoint, you see a piece of ground, you spot a piece of ground, okay? You decide I can afford that. You check out what's it zoned. And then just like he said, you try to stick as many units in there as you possibly can because it means more money. So the incentive thing is really the concept that we need to really adopt, but that needs to be from the get-go when they come in and say, I'm interested in this, and this is what we're thinking. But as like Tony said tonight, not blindside them going, that's a good idea, but man, we'd really like this. And if we can get that, even the committee or something, Nate, whoever, to talk to these developers when they first start, so that they can go to their architect and say, this is kind of what the city is really wanting, and they're gonna help me out a little bit. Then, but I think we got to have something from the very, very beginning when they buy that property, come into the city and say, this is what I want to put on there.
And that's where that overlay zone would come in. Let's just say, for example, master plan community zone that I've made up is an overlay zone. It's already written, it's already in place, it's all there. They would just have to come in and apply for a rezone. Once it's granted, they can move right ahead. And just as we saw tonight, time is incredibly important to development. And so having those design standards, that ordinance right in place. So once they're rezoned, at that point, they can move right ahead. And the city, in preparing for that, does its homework ahead of time, saying, yes, we're willing to give up this density, but we also want these amenities to it. And we're happy with how that is written and how it's shown. And at that point, once they get the rezone, then they can develop by right and they don't have to come back for, approval after approval. It's kind of a one-time deal.
Kind of what I'm talking about is planting the seed in that guy's head that this is direction the city wants to go, because they're coming in with the same old, the same, let's just put these in here, let's stack them in here. We know how much setback, we know driveways, we know all that. So what I'm saying is get a committee or somebody together that right from the beginning, talk to these guys and give them some options, like what we seen tonight that we all got excited about here is we sit down and say, before you get started, what do you think about these ideas? Will this work for you?
So let me just cut in real quick, just from a time standpoint. If you want to spend 30 seconds, wrap up your comment. We got Jason has a comment. We have a comment over here. I want to opine for 30 seconds myself. And then we need to be wrapped up by 8:30. So let's.
I'm good.
All right, go ahead.
So Jake, you wanted some feedback on the changes you made there, 2 to 3, 3 to 5, 6 to 12. I think this is a part where I think this plan just falls apart in my head. When they come and propose 6 to 15 units in all of these areas, people aren't going to stand for that. I just don't think that's going to fly. So I really like that idea. If we're going to keep it rural, like we say we want to do, then I think we've got to keep these size down. Okay, so
Okay.
I appreciate what you're trying.
Are
to
you
get
okay
done.
with these numbers? Are we going in the right direction?
I think those numbers, I mean, that's what our current general plan calls for, right? Very similar-ish.
Okay. It's close to your zoning.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to me. So I like that. When you talk about the incentives, real quick, just a thought about that. So how that's administered, how you do that so it's fair and equitable and so it is consistent. Sounds like a little bit of horse trading and stuff to go on there.
Well,
How do you avoid that?
it's all done through ordinances. So it's written and the rules are the same for everybody. So I
Perfect,
certainly want to
perfect.
stay
Yeah.
away from horse trading.
Exactly.
I never
Thank
was
you.
good at it anyway.
Okay.
Never had a horse, so.
We've got Jason has a question or his hands up. So Jason, you've got the floor.
Okay, I got sidetracked. Listen to that. One sec. Call me in a minute. Hold on.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'll give my 30 seconds based on the feedback you asked for. All that you've shown, I think is a step in the right direction, every piece of it. So I like the master plan community in the dairy area. I agree that the light industrial is kind of there to stay. My only comment there is we have to have a way to get into that master plan community. I don't want to be driving through these warehouses to get to the master. We somehow need to accommodate the entrance to this thing.
I agree.
So that needs to be thought through. As far as what you've got over by the school property on Young Street, that looks great to me. I think that's a good shift to change, keep the frontage, GDMU and then change behind it to MDR. I think that's great. I agree with the densities as you've kind of edited. And I like the concept of bonusing. To me, that just makes this whole thing work. It gives a reason for the developers to want to do the things that we want them to do. I know it's an overused phrase, but then it should be a win-win, is the idea. So that's my comment. Jason, did your thought come back to you yet?
It did. Thank you. And I just feel like the nature of my career, I'm privy to market data. And somebody made the comment of thinking about the developer. So if you think about the developer, the data I can provide is what's happened in the residential marketplace in the last 90 days has been phenomenal. So when you look at this developer, when he started this process, for him to acquire the opportunity of this property, was huge. And the things that are at play right now in the market with interest rates and increasing inventory, quadruple inventory from 60 to 90 days ago, the cost to the developer is the opportunity cost. He has paid a huge price for the opportunity and the cost of money that he's got into that. And so for us to I love the spirit of where we're going, but to delay him is a disservice. And so I'm glad we approved that. And those were just some of my thoughts is the market where we're at is fluctuating what these developers come in and present to us or not. And this opportunity, in my opinion, has changed. I believe it's still a great opportunity, but I bet there are some people that may question at the moment whether it's a wise idea to go invest at the highest construction cost, highest interest rate, and a leveling supply and demand market, whether that's a good opportunity. So I just want to provide that context on what's going on in the market and our influence on this developer and timing and things like that.
Thank you for that context. We've got 2 minutes before our firm deadline. Do you want to wrap this up for us, Jake?
Can I have just?
Oh, we have a comment here. 30 seconds.
Teresa, could you scan up just a little bit so I can see the numbers that he, pens or wrote in on there? Yeah, like that. This is probably going to make me unpopular with a lot of people. As I look at here in this general plan thing, it says Morgan City has long been the economic and social hub of Morgan County, and the role has increased. I look at some of this, and I can't remember who I had the discussion with. They're like, well, gosh, that zoning, it allows someone to tear some houses down on State Street and build multifamily. Well, that's where you want it, I think. I look at Morgan County as a whole, and Morgan City as a part of that county. And I think Morgan City, I don't think it's sustainable. And I think we're doing the future a huge disservice to build out Morgan City with half-acre lots and $1 million homes. I live in front of a subdivision with 7,000 square foot lots that we do not even allow anymore. And you know what? That's not a bad little subdivision. I don't mind it. Sure, I'd probably rather the skunks and the weed patch and the thistle I used to cuss, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think there's probably going to be areas that in order to maintain our Morgan County rural atmosphere, that we are the city, maybe we're going to need to allow a little higher density in some areas. It's on some of our arterial roads. And anyways, like I say, this is probably going to make me unpopular with some, but I think there's areas where we probably need to allow that higher density in the future.
And are you saying higher density with how things are currently written? Because kind of how I frame this is saying in some of these areas, there could be increase in density, but also we're going to ask for higher design standards, things that are more desirable than before.
And I think a lot of that plays into it, where there's that little subdivision we talked about in the work meeting next to me. I think you probably could have put double the density in there and made it look like 6 houses instead of 15 units that look like 15 townhouses.
And I think it can be both. You can have we are the city center, you can have the density and you can have the aesthetics. Last comment, Ray, you were going to say something, and then let's call for adjournment.
I appreciate dialogue. I think we need to look at this, but we'll think about the numbers and look at them. Matt's got a concept. I've had a hard time the last 3 weeks trying to digest it. But the county looks at us as a hub. We need more density. I don't necessarily like it, but we need to consider that. I think we need to think about that, consider that. The other thing is, I'm having a hard time in my mind separating the new developments you're talking about are awesome, but we're talking 2 and 3.5 acres and 1 lots. We're not talking 100 acres at a time. So I'm not sure how some of these design, like the one Nice, they'd be happy to make this change, but they can't with the acreage they've got. it's gonna be impossible for something like that to change with the setback we have in our acreage. So the ordinance has got to come along with this stuff too. Anyway, like the ideas, but I hear you talk about these fantastic great thoughts. You're talking 100 acres at a time. The only place we have is the dairy. Other than that, we're talking 2 or 3, 5, 10 acres at a time.
Yeah, so I want to throw out two zoning ideas to answer that. Master plan community is the bigger parcels, that's where you're doing
Got one
everything.
of those.
And then the next one, and I did this on a city called North Logan in Cache Valley. It was a mixed residential zone where there were two lists of building types. One list was single family of different lot sizes, and then the other list was twin homes, townhomes, the multi-unit home, like we talked about, looks like a single family house. And the developer had to choose from both, and then they could go up to 10 units an acre. And so the zoning ordinance actually forced them to have two building types work together, have some open space, and they were getting about 10 units an acre and still had a park. That works at about 10 to 20 acres is where you can start to do that. That's basically like a neighborhood. So there's that neighborhood level for these small pockets that we could look at, and then the master plan community. And then the third zoning ordinance would be the downtown areas where we're looking at those mixed use buildings like we saw in Bountiful. And those can apply on State Street, Commercial Street, certain areas where you want to really have a downtown presence.
So this will continue to be a discussion. I love that everyone's got ideas on this. That's exactly the way it should be. We're going to wrap up for tonight, and we'll continue this as our next working session. And we'll just keep working through each of these until we get there.
Chair, can I make one request that the planning commission, just when you have time, look at the map. You know the city better than anybody. If things are not right on the map, just email it to me and I'll keep an ongoing list of things to bring back to the group or something we want to look at. Last time somebody brought up that one of the areas identified as development, it was a really steep hillside. I made the note on the plan, we should add the sensitive lands area, steep slopes, floodplains, all that. So we're not planning for housing in areas that are going to be underwater or a steep hillside.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
We are at time that we've made a commitment. We do need a call for adjournment, though. There's someone besides me.
So called. Move that we adjourn.
Meeting adjourned. Well,